Welcome to the Thursday Night Sports Show. It's the only way up for QPR. Have Arsenal got third place sewn up? Tony McCoy looks ahead to the Grand National. We hear from London and Nick Hurst and his obsession with Kung Fu.
BBC London 94.9 Sports.
He doesn't want to book him because he's bigger than him, I think.
The best coverage 7 days a week.
One thing you don't want to do as a referee.
Start playing football, no.
BBC London 94.9.
Good delivery, left footed, miles
The
wide.
home of London sport.
On in our book now, an unusual book of devotion, lethal moves, travels, an 80-year-old master, a wide-eyed student, thousands of miles, and even more devotion. It's called Sugong, which is probably the incorrect pronunciation. We'll find out in a moment. It's the life of a Shaolin Grandmaster. It's a tale of what really happens when a sport takes control of your life and leaves you no alternative but to drop everything and follow that sport. That is what London's Nick Hurst did a few years ago. Sugong is a story of an adventure. The book starts with this little bit. For some, it's a form of spiritual development. For others, a route to health and well-being. Sugong started Kung Fu because he liked to fight and he wanted to win. Nice. And I'm delighted to say that Nick joins me in the studio now. Nick.
Hi.
Good evening. First of all, is that correct pronunciation, Sugong?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. Just explain to us, Nick, what happened to you, whatever it was, 12 or so years ago. Just tell us about this journey you went on, then we'll talk specifically about the book.
Well, what happened is that I was working in marketing. I'd always thought
In
I'm going to
central
take...
London,
Yes, right, yeah. Always thought I'll take a break from it, take a sabbatical. Got to a stage...
Go to Australia or somewhere,
Exactly, yeah.
maybe surfing in Hawaii.
Exactly, go backpacking, spend a lot of time on the beach, have a good time. Then I've been doing Kung Fu in England, thought maybe I should try to do something a little bit different. I'd done backpacking when I was in a gap year and all this kind of thing. Thought maybe I'll try a little bit different and go away, train with my Kung Fu master's master. So I went out there.
So this is a guy in wherever you trained in the UK.
That's right.
The guy that trained you had been trained by this guy, and there was a picture of this guy up above on the wall, wasn't there? You'd been looking at for years.
Exactly. So all I knew about him was he looked quite scary, and everyone said that he was very scary. But he was still the guy that taught my master, and I obviously... In martial arts, your master, you're thinking he's something special.
Yeah,
so if
course.
there's someone who's taught your master, he's very special. So I thought, right, I'll give it a go. I'll go out there. The problem was that he didn't know that I was coming out there. So we tried to contact him, but he tended to kind of wander around the place a little bit. He was meant to be based in Kuala Lumpur, but he was from China, and he'd go back quite often.
Places in between, almost. It seems that way.
Yeah. So there was a letter written to him, but no one knew whether he'd got the letter. He hadn't replied to it or anything like that. I thought, right, I'll still take the chance in any case, and flew out there.
And when you first flew out there, Nick, how long were you going for? I mean,
it was meant to be just 6 months. Well,
okay.
I was going to train with him for about 4 and then do a bit of paradise stuff.
So
exactly.
basically, you're going to see this guy you've been looking at on this wall at this gym or whatever. Let's call it a gym for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So you've been training, this form of kung fu, looking at this guy on the wall, and then suddenly you decide, you know what, I'll go and meet him. Fantastic little adventure. And of course, it didn't quite work out to be a little adventure. It was fantastic. It wasn't quite little, though, was it? What happened, Nick?
Exactly. So, well, I got out there, finally got to meet him. He was disappeared for a couple of weeks, but I got back. Didn't seem too keen to teach me, but he agreed to in the end. So I started doing all the training with him. The first few days, it seemed like it wasn't going too badly. Then I don't know what it was, but something about me irritated him. So every day he'd teach me less and less, and he'd be shouting at me more and more. So time went on.
In not just Chinese, but a sort of village version of that Chinese. So even people that spoke that version of Chinese couldn't understand him. Is that fair assessment?
Yeah. So
this guy's a real oddity, by the way. I mean, this guy, this is like stepping back several centuries almost.
Yeah,
correct?
exactly.
I mean that nicely.
Yeah. And it wasn't just that I couldn't understand a word of it, and he was shouting very loud. I mean, he was a very charismatic guy, and he had a nice side to him, but he was scary as hell as well.
Which is why he's one of these grandmasters.
Exactly, yeah. So I was getting shouted at in front of a whole load of other people. Every now and then, when he was feeling a bit softer, he'd just take the piss out of me, and people would laugh at me. So I was either getting shouted at or having fun made out of me.
Just 1 second. Sorry about that swear word. It's not really that bad, but I do apologise anyway. Sorry, Nick. So you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. It's not. We don't. Yeah, I don't get in trouble. But if we it won't be repeated. I assure you. Don't look at me like that. I'm interviewing a kung fu master. Get lost. Got to talk to my producer. Sometimes you've got to put these people in their place. Carry on, Nick.
I've forgotten where I was now.
That's right. So some days you used to take the mickey out of you.
Yes, he'd
That's
take the
the word
mickey out
we
of
were
me.
looking
Yes,
for.
yes. And so sometimes he'd take the mickey out of me. Either way, it was getting a little bit difficult.
Yeah. No, but you didn't just stay for 3 or 4 months, did you? It ended up being, how long was it, Nick?
It ended up being kind of 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, okay.
That
happens.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. The idea was I was just going to do it, come back and go back to work again. Then it turned out I heard more. I didn't hear it from him directly because I couldn't understand a word of him. Exactly. So you'd always go for breakfast, and it was kind of the way that you'd show face, and you know, all the students would join in.
I'm assuming it wasn't Chinese Weetabix.
Not quite. No.
Give us a clue, because some of the descriptions of the breakfast are quite entertaining.
Yeah, well, some of them sounded a bit weird, but tasted quite good. So there's like fish head soup, chicken's feet. They're 8:30 in the morning, so
it's tough, man.
It's challenging, but
unless you're coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, but even then it's quite tricky. But yeah, there's things like intestines that just never taste good whatever time of day you're at.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, so that was definitely different from my kind of regular toast.
And you started to hear stories about his life. Now, I mean, at first, even though he's a guy you've been admiring, looking at his picture, and you've been with him, and I'm assuming he was an impressive character. We'll get onto his hands in a moment.
Yeah.
But even so, you're starting to hear these stories. I mean, it's like fantastical. It's almost like they're almost wild, crazy adventures. You must have been thinking, this is just incredible. Give us a little flavour. Don't give too much away, because that's why I want people to buy the book.
I mean, it was just everything. I mean, he seemed to, every time there was a major event happening in the 20th century, he seemed to have been stuck right in the middle of it. So they tried to kind of conscript him into the army during the Chinese Revolution. He was kind of in the middle of race riots, which kicked off in Malaysia. Taiwan after, when it was all kicking off in the 80s there,
and numerous encounters with triads throughout his life, and I mean throughout his life, from 16 through to sort of 80 or something mad.
Yeah,
Talk
pretty much so.
That.
Well, it would be that. I mean, it was difficult in those days when you're in Chinese areas in Southeast Asia. There tended to be a stronger influence of the triads, and so it wasn't really a case of whether you choose to get involved with them or not. But what you can do is choose to not become a triad, although even then that was quite difficult. But even if you weren't one, it's very difficult not to run into them. Now, if you run into them normally as a normal guy, then you probably come out the worst side of it. But with Sugong, he kind of had some talent, so he usually didn't come out the wrong side of it.
But right up until till the time you were there, as such, that it wasn't like something that happened to him in the 40s or 50s or 60s, was it? It was something that happened to him close up towards the end.
I mean, he was he was still beating me at arm wrestle, still doing his one-handed press up, still kind of breaking concrete when he was 80 years old. And so if there was people that thought they could mug him or anything like that, it still wasn't happening when he was 80.
But it's all sort of mad because he was involved, in construction of one place, the car park, which you then trained in KL, Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
And then of course he had some sort of fish, sort of food stall and stuff. And then of course he had his own gym or centre for martial arts. He did lots of different things, didn't he? He's a bit of a. I mean, he's obviously enigmatic character.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most charismatic person I've ever come across. I mean, he's the most difficult person I've ever come across, but there's still something about him that was just quite magnetic in his personality. Sure. I mean, he'd come from he'd grown up in a village, kind of working from the age of 5 on a farm, and so he'd had about 2 years of education. So everything was kind of self-taught, and he could read and write, which in with Chinese with the characters is quite a challenge, and that was without any education. So he was always kind of he had an entrepreneurial mind, even if his business sense was pretty bad.
But he was involved in some sort of kidnapping thing, around some sort of opium masters were involved. I mean, it's just with a little bit of twist. It reads like a work. It could read like parts of it read like a work of fiction.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, that's why I wrote it, because I heard all this stuff and I just couldn't believe it. And I've always liked the idea of writing a book, but I didn't know what to write. All of a sudden, someone throws about 10 books worth into my lap, and I've just got to condense it into one.
Tell me about his hands, because the pictures of his hands, and then once I saw that picture of his hands, this guy had enormous hands and big, strong hands as well. They were actually X-rays of them, saying just how great they were, like like the young man's hands, which is mad considering the things he'd hit and broken with them over his years. But what I found interesting is then I started looking at his hands in some of those older pictures when he was 18, 20, 22, 2023.
Yeah.
And sure enough, his hands stood out.
Yeah.
They were just these enormous hands. What was it like shaking them or being hit with them? Because he hit you several times.
It was incredible because he's only about 5 foot tall.
Yep.
And so, he's a foot taller than me. Now, he loved his jewellery, so he had these big gold rings and whatever. So every now and then he'd take them off and I'd try them on. I couldn't, it would jangle around on my thumb.
Wow.
And it's a guy that's a foot smaller than me, and he just what you do conditioning. So the conditioning kind of it doesn't sound too bad, but basically you're just beating your hands on sandbags that are filled with stones, and then he'd do the stuff like you see in the kung fu films, which is into the sand and stone that's heated up and all these kind of things. So
of course you do this over years. This is the thing in kung fu films. You do it over 2 weeks, then you go and kill people. It's different, but in reality, you study it for years.
He did it forever.
Years.
I mean, he was still doing it. Well, on my website sugong.co.uk, there's still the videos of him, breaking concrete block, hammering nails into a plank with his hands. Yeah, and that was 6 months before he passed away.
Now, within the world of Shaolin masters or grandmasters and sort of kung fu folklore, where does he fit? I mean, is he one of those guys, one of those sort of 20th century guys, or not? That's a real figure. Is he a big pivotal figure?
I'd love to say he's the Bruce Lee of the times or whatever, but it's with kung fu. There's just so many different types, and in China there's so many different people. So you've get people, within Malaysia of his time, he was very well known, and he was in the kind of the toughest areas, and his schools were the toughest schools.
And one of the guys that trained him, the old guy that he was, acknowledged and comes across in the pictures as a sort of, he was the guy that meant to have had all those mad powers that he could jump over 12-foot walls.
Yeah, exactly, which are disputed.
And we know which Sugong says to you, basically, rubbish, I was with him for years.
Yeah.
If he could jump over 12-foot walls, I think I would have known.
Exactly.
But he could do other things, couldn't he? He could sort of...
I mean...
the invisibility thing. Explain to me about the invisibility.
Yeah, well, he called it the art of stealth, so it wasn't quite invisibility. But yeah, I mean, there was a whole idea that he did have this art of stealth where he could just kind of move. There's something called I've forgotten it now, Qinggung, where it just means that you kind of train, and they do it with sandbags on, and you're jumping up walls and things, and all this stuff is just to improve. And
so when you do it normally,
you're flying, yeah. Okay. And so there are all these kind of things, and then on top of that, there was this, it's just one guy, and it was just the roughest, toughest area. Singapore back then wasn't too easy. This is an abbot of a temple, but he had all of these tough young guys, that he was trying to turn away from crime, and all of these guys weren't scared of anything apart from him. He had that power and authority.
And it looks like it. He's an interest. I mean, your man's interested. Yeah. He's also interested. Now, there was a couple of things I picked out all the way through, which I've obviously forgotten now. Not that it matters. Now, have you been back since February 2010? Because I know that's when he died. Have you been back there to see?
No, I haven't. No, I mean, I'm in touch with all of them, and a couple of them are coming over this summer and things.
And are you still? Is it practicing? You're not going to say playing. Are you still involved in kung fu? And did you attain? What level did you attain, having trained with him for all those years? Again,
I'm still doing it, but it's one of those things. There isn't quite a kind of a standardised.
I appreciate it. There's no belts as such, so you don't just become a black belt and then retire.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I'm a black belt in the school that I'm at here, which is with.
But that's just the start.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
so
like,
you don't know the language. That's just the start of the journey. No, it's true. I understand that. Once you get to that level, now we begin. It's that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the other thing is that I was doing it when I was out there. I was doing it much more on the kind of art than the martial side, because he was kind of, he wasn't teaching as many students, and they were kind of older ones and things like that. So it was kind of more on there was less kind of combat side of things.
I understand.
But yeah, obviously if you're training every day, you improve.
So the book's called, it's by Nick Hurst, who's been my guest for the last 20 or 15 odd minutes. Sugong, The Life of Shaolin Grandmaster. It's out now, is it, Nick?
It is, yeah.
And it's published by sportsbooks.limited.uk. I'm assuming it's on Amazon.
It's on all of the sites.
On Amazon. Are you doing any signings, do you know?
There aren't any planned at the moment.
Well, if you get one, let me know, and I'll make sure that I make mention there, because it's not just a book about kung fu or martial arts, and it's not a travel book, and it's not a straightforward, this guy was very famous and he could do kicks. It's a lot of different things, and it's very entertaining, and there's loads and loads of different bits for you. And I would imagine if you've been anywhere, Singapore, China, or certainly out in Malaysia anyway. I mean, imagine if people that will understand and really get this. So in addition to martial artists.
Yeah, I mean, because there are travel aspects as well,
Yeah,
and
of
there's
course
a kind of
there are.
cultural
There's a bit of
side of
everything,
it. Yeah.
So what are you doing now? No, have you just come back to a normal life now? Now that this
Just
is all
come back
done?
to normal life. Yeah,
Oh.
although this is getting slightly unnormal again.
Yeah, well, it's good, and so it should get slightly odd and slightly strange. Listen, Nick, it's been a pleasure having you in. Nick Hurst, Sugong, The Life of a Shaolin Grandmaster. It's out now. It's available on Amazon, and you can buy it. It's $9.99, but Amazon always knock about £4 off it, don't they? And that kills you as well, because you don't get that difference.
No, you don't.
Amazon decide they want to do something. That's it. They do it. Nick, it's been a pleasure having you in. Thanks so much. Don't go too quick, because you're going to sign my book. And believe me, I don't ask everyone that comes in here with a book to sign it. I generally say, listen, it's fantastic. Yeah, safe journey home. Throw it away. Not on this occasion. This is Steve Bunce on BBC London 94.9. You know what's coming up in a few minutes' time. Yes, it will be the award-winning, jaw-dropping, gut-wrenching boxing hour. But first, it's the travel and news and stuff like that. Thank you.